The world changes when you stare at it without moving. It's in that instant, brief, invisible, almost impossible to measure, that something bends in the space between what you see and what you are. A bird stops in midair, sound dissolves, and even time seems to tilt, as if waiting for your next breath to decide what happens next. There's a hidden power in the simple act of being, and it begins when the impulse to react gives way to the lucidity of observation. We live hypnotized by haste, convinced that everything depends on the speed with which we act. We rush, we respond, we search for the next step before the ground settles beneath our feet. And in this rush, we forget what sustains movement. The point of silence between one thought and another, the space where reality reorganizes itself before it is born. Because the universe doesn't respond to force, it responds to focus. And when focus stabilizes, the entire world tilts. The paradox is this: the more you try to control what you see, the less you see it as it is. It's like touching the surface of a lake. Every gesture creates distortion, every attempt to hold the image only destroys it. But if you remain still, allow yourself to simply observe, the reflection returns. Clear, real, and suddenly, something reveals itself, not out there, but within the observing gaze. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is the origin of all true action. It is in the center of silence that probabilities are rewritten, that chance bends, that the impossible finds space to exist. But few can endure the moment when nothing seems to happen, because the ego fears emptiness. It craves noise, movement, and proof. However, the field is not impressed by effort, it responds to coherence. And when this coherence emerges, when the observer aligns with what they observe, reality gives way. Doors open without a push, coincidences cease to be chance, and life begins to respond with a precision almost impossible to explain. What was once chaos becomes pattern, what was waiting becomes synchronicity. It is in this moment, between sound and silence, between gaze and reflection, that the paradox reveals itself. The world doesn't change when you force it, it changes when you see it clearly enough to let it move on its own. Have you ever noticed how everything seems to slip away when you try too hard to control it? Conversations fall apart, plans fall apart, people drift apart, and the more you try to make it work, the more everything seems to fall apart. It's like trying to hold water with your hands open. The more force you use, the faster it flows. And yet, we insist on holding on, as if the secret to life lies in doing more, thinking more, running more. But what if what's missing isn't intensity, but silence? The observer's paradox isn't a distant theory. It happens here, now, within you. It's the moment your heart races and your mind tries to anticipate what's coming, but something inside you whispers to stop. It's your body asking for a pause while the world demands haste. At this point, an invisible choice presents itself: to continue trying to control the flow, or to trust the space between actions. Most don't realize it, but it's in this interval that the field forms. Stillness isn't the end of movement, it's the place where movement begins to obey. When you observe without judgment, things change texture. Situations that seemed threatening take on softer contours. Answers that weren't forthcoming begin to form naturally, effortlessly. Life doesn't ignore you, it just waits for you to stop screaming so it can whisper. The universe doesn't speak loudly. It communicates on the frequency of calm. And that's why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation, because each word spoken in this state is a reminder of something the body already knew but the mind has forgotten. Presence is a subtle force. It doesn't conquer, it magnetizes. It doesn't compete, it attracts. When the gaze becomes clear enough, chaos rearranges itself. Nothing is forced, but everything falls into place. Time loses its linear character and becomes malleable, as if the present moment expanded to swallow both past and future. It is in this expansion that the paradox begins to emerge clearly. The observer doesn't transform the world by acting upon it, but by altering the way they perceive it. And perhaps that's why some people seem to live in sync, not because they're lucky, but because they've learned to stand still at the right time. They've understood that power lies not in noise, but in listening. And as the sound of the world quiets, what once seemed impossible begins to move. Something is about to happen, not outside, but within what you observe. But there comes a time when this stillness begins to test you, when silence ceases to be a refuge and becomes a mirror. It reflects everything that was hidden: the fear of losing control, the need for answers, the restlessness of those who always believed that value lies in doing. This is when the paradox reveals itself in its purest form, because the more you try to remain calm, the more the inner chaos stirs. The body wants to run, the mind wants to resolve, the heart wants to understand. And all the universe asks is, observe. Observing is not easy. It means bearing the weight of one's own reflection without wanting to correct it. It means witnessing a storm within oneself without fleeing to the shelter of old certainties. The mind cries out for movement, for noise, for any distraction that prevents the encounter with the center. But the field does not respond to fear. It only moves when the observer ceases the struggle. Power lies not in erasing the darkness, but in remaining within it without losing oneself. There's a strange beauty in this moment. Time seems to bend, your breath becomes dense, and you feel as if you're about to pass through something invisible. The outside world remains the same. Cars pass, voices speak, clocks tick, but inside, there's a silent earthquake. It's the moment when the old pattern tries to survive, clinging to what remains of the familiar. And even without knowing what's coming, you feel like you can't go back. The observer's paradox is this: the universe doesn't bend because you force it, but because you witness it. It rearranges itself before the consciousness that doesn't try to dominate it. Stillness becomes magnetism. Silence, command. But before you can achieve this clarity, you must cross the blind spot, the space where everything that isn't true dissolves. And this blind spot doesn't warn you when it arrives. It appears as a profound weariness, an emptiness in the midst of the search, a sense of loss even when nothing has been taken. It's the moment the field tests your surrender. If you resist, the world remains opaque. But if you stay, something changes, not explosively, but like a light that slowly turns on, transforming the darkness into understanding. There's something moving behind this silence. Something that hasn't yet shown itself, but is already coming. And then, just as the silence seems about to break, something different happens. A presence emerges, not from outside, but in the center of the chest. It's a calm that's independent of circumstances, a serenity that seems too ancient to have been learned in this life. It requires no explanation, no proof. It simply exists, like an ember that never went out, waiting to be remembered. And when that memory awakens, the fear loses some of its strength. The noise continues, but it no longer dominates. Perhaps this is what many mistake for enlightenment. Not the absence of shadow, but the awareness that it never truly held power. The observer perceives what once imprisoned them, and suddenly, the knot unravels. Emotions continue to come, but now they pass like waves that no longer drag you along. You feel anger, sadness, doubt, but you also feel the ground beneath, your breath flowing, your heart still beating. And you realize, you are not what you feel. You are the space where all this happens. This realization changes everything. The world doesn't become lighter because things improve, but because our gaze no longer carries the weight of controlling them. It's like seeing the same scene for the second time and realizing that, behind the shapes, there's a silent harmony sustaining everything. The chaos, the error, the waiting, nothing is out of place. And it's at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent sign that the message has touched them, as if this small gesture were a reminder, I also recognize this stillness. Life begins to respond differently. Coincidences return, but now they feel like conversations. Pauses, once uncomfortable, become portals. And with each breath, consciousness expands a little more, as if the entire universe were breathing together. Time loses its rigid outline, past and future seem to dissolve into the present, a present so dense, so real, that it seems impossible to want to escape it. But there is something this stillness has not yet revealed. A deeper layer, hidden beneath understanding and beyond sensation. Something that begins to pulse at the edges of perception, like a distant echo calling back to the center. The observer is about to discover that stillness is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of something even greater. But when this calm becomes constant, something unexpected begins to happen. The silence that once brought comfort begins to reveal truths you might not have been ready to see. It's as if the light, as it intensifies, begins to reveal not only the beautiful, but also what was forgotten in the corners of your soul. Old fears, subtle patterns, little lies that sustained the illusion of control. Everything emerges, not as punishment, but as liberation. The field doesn't lie. It reveals what still vibrates outside the frequency of what you desire to be. And in that moment, Stillness ceases to be just a refuge and becomes a sharp mirror. You realize that observing also means confronting. That seeing clearly requires piercing through the fog your ego has erected to shield you from what you don't want to feel. The pain, the emptiness, the regret, everything you've postponed now presents itself before you, demanding acknowledgement. Not judgment, not escape, just presence. There's a kind of beauty in this. Because while fear tries to convince us that something is being lost, in fact, the opposite is true. Something is being returned. Authenticity, coherence, the quiet strength of being exactly who you are, without masks. The external world, for a time, may even seem to unravel. Opportunities disappear, people move away, paths blur. But beneath this apparent loss, there's a deeper reorganization taking place. Life adjusts to the new field you've begun to emit. The heart, once restless, learns to rest within its own rhythm. The body aligns. Emotions find space to flow without imprisonment. It's as if your entire existence breathes along with you, in a truer rhythm. There's a sense of loss and gain at the same time, as if old parts die so a new, clearer, and quieter version can be born. And yet, something still pulses in the background. A soft, almost imperceptible echo, reminding us that the observer's paradox still holds one last secret. One that isn't revealed by the mind, but by direct experience. Something that begins to form between the pauses, between one thought and the next. As if the universe itself were preparing to reveal what truly happens when the observer and the observed finally become one. As the silence deepens, the world around you begins to change texture. Colors seem more vivid, but also more distant. Time slows down, and what was once automatic, a gesture, a thought, a reaction, begins to happen in slow motion. It's as if the entire universe breathes between your seconds, observing what you will do with this new space between impulse and response. And it is in this interval that everything reveals itself. You realize how much of your life has been driven not by choice, but by reflex. How many times have you said yes to avoid the discomfort of saying no? How many times have you run, not because you wanted to arrive, but because you were afraid of standing still? Stillness lays bare these hidden movements. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't judge, it simply reveals. And in the face of this clarity, a kind of vulnerability emerges that can no longer be disguised. The paradox intensifies. The more you remain still, the more life challenges you. People become mirrors. Situations repeat themselves in new guises, as if the field wants to test whether the learning is real. There are days when silence feels like an embrace, and others when it feels like a prison. And yet, something inside you insists on remaining. Because, even when everything seems to be falling apart, there is a presence that remains whole. It is at this point that the line between gain and loss blurs. What seemed like achievement begins to weigh heavily, and what seemed like failure reveals wisdom. Certainties evaporate, and what remains is only feeling, raw, real, inevitable. The mind tries to understand, but the heart already knows. This collapse is the beginning of reorganization. The old bows before the new, not with resistance, but with silent surrender. Light and shadow dance in this interval. One reveals the shape of the other. And between them, there's an invisible force field, a constant pulse that seems to come from a place before existence itself. You feel like you're about to touch something that's always been there, but for some reason has been forgotten. Something that can't be taught or explained. It can only be recognized. And yet, the moment is not yet complete. Your breath is held, as if the entire universe holds the air with you. Something is about to happen, a revelation that comes not from without, but from the quietest center within you. When silence begins to become habitual, the surrounding countryside responds in almost imperceptible ways. People approach or move away without you needing to explain anything. Doors that once required effort to open now move with a simple touch, and others, which you believed were fundamental, close permanently. There's no drama, just a subtle adjustment, as if reality itself were rearranging itself to match the new rhythm you emit. Everything changes because the observer has changed. You realize that the answers you've been searching for were never out of reach. They were just obscured by the noise of your attempts. And when your mind finally quiets, what emerges is not an external miracle, but a synchronicity, a sequence of coincidences that seem orchestrated by something greater. An encounter that arrives at just the right time. An obstacle that dissolves before it becomes a problem. A simple gesture from someone who, unknowingly, offers exactly what you needed to hear. This is how the field speaks, not with words, but with alignments. Yet each new clarity brings its own test. The universe seems to want to confirm that you truly understood what you asked for. It presents the lesson again, in a different form. The same pattern, the same discomfort, but now there's a difference. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of fighting, you listen. And it's in this space between impulse and response that power begins to manifest. Because true mastery isn't over the world, it's over the very frequency you project into it. Some would call it luck, others faith. But deep down, it's about coherence. When what you feel, think, and do finally align, the universe no longer needs to push. It follows. Resistance dissolves because you no longer feed it. Effort gives way to precision. Time ceases to be an enemy and becomes an accomplice. There is a quiet elegance in everything that moves from calm. And it is at this point that many realize something curious. Reality bends not to will, but to clarity. The purer the signal, the faster the response. And this realization changes everything. It is the moment when the observer understands that every emotion, every choice, every pause is a subtle command sent to the field. Some, upon recognizing this, let out an almost involuntary smile, perhaps the same one you are feeling now, seeing yourself reflected in these lines. And if something inside you stirred as you read this, perhaps it is a sign that the field has just responded. But it's precisely when everything seems to be flowing that the paradox intensifies. The clarity that once seemed stable begins to shift, like light reflected on water. You try to hold on to it, but the more you try to define it, the more it slips away. It's at this point that the universe tests not your strength, but your surrender. Because true stillness isn't the absence of movement, it's the confidence that the right movement has already begun. The signs change shape. What yesterday seemed like progress today reveals itself as a distraction. What once felt like loss now appears as a necessary detour. Everything that was linear begins to bend, creating a kind of logic that the mind doesn't understand, but the body feels. It's like walking on a road that disappears behind you with every step. The only ground is the present moment. And it is in that instant that reality bends. There is beauty in this apparent chaos. It forces the observer to let go of control, to realize that true power lies not in manipulating the field, but in listening to it. Every situation becomes a secret conversation with the invisible, a silent discussion between what you say you want and what truly vibrates within you. And the field, impassive, responds to what is authentic, never to what is rehearsed. Then the paradox becomes clearer. The more you try to control creation, the more distant it becomes. But when you finally accept that there's nothing to control, everything begins to fall into place. Desire loses the weight of need and transforms into direction. Action ceases to be born of fear and begins to blossom from calm. There's no longer any rush, because you begin to realize that time is merely a mirror of your inner state. And yet, the mystery remains. Because, between each breath, there is an instant when the field seems to wait. A pause in which the universe observes whether you will react as before, or remain. This pause is the edge of reality, the point where the invisible prepares to become form. You don't know what will come, but you feel it is very close. Almost within reach. As if space itself were about to give way and reveal what has always been there, hidden beneath the veil of movement. There comes a point where silence ceases to be a refuge and becomes a mirror. In it, everything that was scattered begins to return. Forgotten memories, broken promises, intentions never fulfilled. It's as if stillness pulls back fragments of who you were, only to ask, what still makes sense to carry? And in that question lies both discomfort and liberation. Because when the mind no longer finds support in old narratives, a kind of emptiness emerges. It's not absence, it's space. A space that seems to observe you from within, as if reality itself awaits your new way of responding. And in this state, duality becomes clearer, light casts longer shadows, trust coexists with fear, progress carries doubt in its hand. Everything that was once certain now needs to be felt anew, with a different body, a different perspective. You realize that the field doesn't reward you for understanding, but for integrating. Knowing is no longer enough. You must live the new frequency until it becomes your skin. And this requires surrender. Not a passive surrender, but a kind of radical presence, one that observes the chaos without dissolving into it. The paradox repeats itself in cycles, increasingly subtle. Calm brings more subtle challenges, and learning more silent. There are times when the universe seems to stop to see if you're staying. The absence of response is sometimes the ultimate test, because true mastery isn't manifesting what you want, but remaining consistent even when nothing moves. That's when the field measures your vibration, not in achievements, but in the interval between them. The image becomes clear, you at the center of a circle of waves, emanating and receiving, unsure where one begins and the other ends. All that exists is resonance. Each emotion is a sound that shapes the matter around it. And in this recognition, something changes, not outside, but inside. An old memory awakens. You were never the effect. You were always the cause. Still, the cycle doesn't close. The air seems denser, time more elastic. Something is about to happen, but there's no rush. Just the feeling of being exactly at the point where the invisible prepares to become visible. The moment when the observer and the observed begin to recognize each other as the same pulse. And then comes the moment when everything falls into place, not like a spectacle, but like a whisper you finally understand. The field, once distant and enigmatic, now pulses in sync with your breathing. You realize there is no difference between what you observe and what you create, that the world around you responds not to what you think, but to what you are as you observe. And it is in this silent recognition that reality begins to bend, gently, obedient to the tone of your internal state. The air feels lighter. Time feels less rigid. Each breath brings a clarity that can't be explained, only felt. There's an unexpected beauty in the little things. The distant sound of a clock, the slow movement of a curtain, the simple beating of your own heart. Everything aligns in a subtle harmony, as if the universe were just waiting for you to remember. You are always part of the whole. Stillness ceases to be an effort and becomes language. It's the natural way of existing when there's no longer any separation between you and the flow that moves you. But there's something even deeper to this, an understanding that comes without words. You understand that nothing needs to be forced because nothing is lost. That every pause, every silence, every moment you thought you were still, was the field itself reorganizing itself around your new frequency. What once felt like waiting was gestation. And what once felt like absence was just space being created for the new to enter. This realization changes the way you act. Choices become simpler, not because the world has become easier, but because the noise has ceased. Decisions flow like water following the terrain, effortlessly, yet purposefully. And at that point, presence becomes contagious. People around you feel it, even if they don't understand. The coherence is silent, but impossible to ignore. Perhaps that's why so many choose to remain here, following each revelation as if recognizing an echo of their own awakening. Because every word spoken in this space isn't just sound, it's a mirror vibrating with the truest part of you. If something within you has expanded now, if your breathing has slowed, if the world seems a little clearer, then the field has already responded. And perhaps the most coherent gesture you can offer in this moment is to leave a signal, a comment, an inscription, a simple, silent yes, not to mark your presence, but to affirm what has awakened. Take a deep breath. The observer's paradox is this: by stopping, you move the universe. By falling silent, you speak your most ancient language. And the world, recognizing the vibration, leans in slightly to hear it.